My name is Thea Atwood, and I'm 38 years old. Not long ago, I sat at the respondent's table in a county courtroom while a lawyer in a suit that cost more than my oven called me a kidnapper, and the 3 kids I've raised for 12 years were listed as my victims. Across the aisle, my sister cried beautifully into a tissue she never once used. 12 years ago, she parked in my driveway, unbuckled her children, and asked me for 1 hour. 1. I got 12 years of fevers, lunchboxes, and night terrors. She got a head start. Now she was back with fresh highlights, a lawyer, and a petition that said I stole her family. But here's what none of them knew. Inside my bag, underneath my checkbook, sat a sealed envelope. 11 years old, never opened, a city name inked across the corner. What happened when the judge finally slid it open, what he asked me, and what I said back. I'll get there. I promise you it's worth staying for. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women tell the loudest stories of their lives, stories about family, betrayal, and the people who choose to stay. If this one presses on a familiar bruise, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what a woman like me does when she finally stops being quiet. Let me take you back 12 years, to a Saturday morning in June. I was 26, renting a worn little house on Cherry Lane, working nights at a diner and saving every tip for culinary school. Kendra's minivan pulled in at 9:15 with the muffler coughing. My sister was 31 then, a widow of 13 months, and she came up my walk carrying Ellie on her hip like a purse she'd grown tired of. Ellie was 1 year old and warm with a low fever. Jonah was 3, asleep on his feet. Mara was 5 and holding everyone's shoes. Behind them, Kendra dragged 2 garbage bags of clothes and dropped them on my porch, the way you drop off donations. She smelled like cigarettes and vanilla lotion, and her eyes kept sliding to the van. She said she had an appointment she couldn't miss. She said she couldn't take the kids to it. Then she pressed the diaper bag into my arms and smiled the smile that had gotten her out of everything since 1989. Just 1 hour, T, I swear. I asked what kind of appointment starts on a Saturday. She was already walking backward down my steps. Mara waved at the van until it turned the corner, and then she asked if there were popsicles, and there were. And that was our whole afternoon. Popsicles, cartoons, a fever that broke by 4 o'clock. At 6, I called Kendra. At 7, I called again. By 10, I was standing at my front window with Ellie asleep on my shoulder, watching every set of headlights come up Cherry Lane. Watching every single one of them keep going. The porch light stayed on all night. The van never came back up my street. By Sunday night, her voicemail was full. By Monday, it wouldn't ring at all. I called the police, and a tired sergeant explained to me that grown adults are allowed to disappear, that it isn't a crime to leave your kids with family, and that I should call back if I found signs of foul play. The only foul play I found was in her apartment. Her landlord let me in on Tuesday, because she owed him rent and he was hoping I'd pay it. The place was empty. Not ransacked. Empty. Closets bare. Hangers gone. The crib already sold to somebody on a classifieds board. The neighbor across the hall told me a truck had come the Thursday before. The Thursday before. She'd packed out her whole life while I was pulling a double shift, and then she'd driven her children to my porch like the last errand on a moving checklist. My mother, Ruth, sat in my kitchen that week with her hands folded and said the thing she would keep saying for the next 8 years. She'll come back, Thea. She's their mother. Mom said it like a law of nature, like gravity, like something you'd be foolish to argue with. I wanted to believe her. Ray had died in a highway accident 13 months before, and grief does strange things to people, and maybe my sister just needed air. That's what I told myself while I bought a car seat at a yard sale. Then one night I was tucking in Mara, 5 years old, on a fold-out couch, in a room that still had my cookbooks in it, and she looked up at me and asked, "Did we do something wrong?" I said, "No, baby. Somebody did. But it was never you." People ask how you raise 3 kids overnight with no warning, and the honest answer is badly, and then less badly, and then one day, you realize you've done it for a year. I dropped my culinary school application in a drawer and picked up every shift the diner would give me. I learned that Ellie would only sleep if the dryer was running. I learned that Jonah wheezed when he cried too hard, and that a nebulizer costs real money even with a coupon. I learned that lice shampoo goes on sale in August and that shame is a luxury item, so I stopped buying it. I signed us up for WIC and stood in line behind women who looked exactly as tired as I did, and nobody in that line asked me where their mother was. Mom helped. She kept the kids on my double shift nights, and she loved them hard. But her generation had rules about trouble. You didn't air family laundry. You didn't say the word abandoned at church. You said Kendra was traveling. For a while, I even let the kids believe some version of that, because what do you tell a 5-year-old? The truth had teeth, and she was so small. The first real wall I hit wasn't money, it was a clipboard. Kindergarten registration for Jonah, one line near the bottom, signature of parent or legal guardian. I stood in that school office holding a pen I had no right to use. The secretary was kind about it. She'd seen it before, she said. Aunts, grandmas, big sisters. She slid the form back to me and lowered her voice like she was telling me a secret. You're going to need paperwork, honey. And paperwork, it turned out, needed my sister. The clipboard was a warning. The emergency room was a verdict. 14 months in, Jonah, 4 years old by then, caught a chest cold that turned mean at 2 in the morning. His little ribs were pulling with every breath, so I drove him in, and somewhere between triage and the treatment room, a nurse asked the question that changed my life. Are you her mother? No. Legal guardian? No. She was kind, and they treated him anyway, because that's what emergency rooms do. But a hospital social worker found me in the hallway at 4 a.m. with a folder and a gentle voice, and she explained my situation in plain English. I had no legal standing. None. I couldn't consent to surgery if it ever came to that. I couldn't enroll them, insure them, or defend them. And if the wrong person ever made the wrong phone call, the county could scoop up all 3 kids and place them in foster care while the system sorted out what I was to them. Strangers' houses. Maybe separate strangers' houses. I sat in my car in the parking garage while the sun came up, and Jonah slept against the window, and I made the first cold decision of my life. Monday morning, I hired a lawyer in town. She said the cleanest road was legal custody through the juvenile court, and the cleanest version of that road ran through Kendra's signature. Nobody had heard from my sister in 14 months, so I hired a private investigator too, $1,800, half up front. He found her in 9 days, working a lounge outside Tulsa under her maiden name. I emptied my culinary school fund, arranged 2 days off, and drove 900 miles. She met me at a motel off Route 66, because she didn't want me seeing where she lived. 14 months, and my sister looked both better and worse. New acrylic nails, an expensive jacket, and eyes that had checked out of our family like it was a room she'd already paid for. I set the papers on the little table by the window. Consent to legal custody. A notary was coming at 3. The lawyer had arranged it with a mobile service. Kendra flipped through the pages like a menu. She didn't ask about Ellie's fever, or Jonah's lungs, or whether Mara still held everyone's shoes. She asked what was in it for her. I want to be careful here, because this is the part of the story I kept sealed for 11 years, and I'm still going to keep it sealed a little longer. There was a price. She wrote it down herself, on motel stationery, in the looping handwriting our mother used to praise. I read what she wrote, and something in me went very quiet and never got loud again. I paid it. The notary came at 3, watched her sign, stamped the seal. And while I was sliding the folder into my bag, Kendra lit a cigarette and smiled at me through the smoke. You always wanted to play house with my kids. Congratulations. I stopped at the door. I told her the truth, level as a shelf. I'm not playing anything, I'm just the one who stayed. Then I drove 900 miles home with a folder on the passenger seat worth more than my car, pulled into Cherry Lane at midnight, and stood in the doorway of the kids' room listening to them breathe. What she made me trade for that signature. I'll tell you when I can say it out loud. We're not there yet. The juvenile court granted me legal custody that fall, and the next 10 years happened the way bread rises, slowly and then all at once. I want to be honest about one thing. I did try to close the door for good. 5 years in, I filed to terminate her parental rights so I could adopt them outright. It cost me $4,000 in fees, and it died on the table because Kendra hired an hourly lawyer just long enough to object, and then evaporated again, and the case stalled out on service and searches until the court dismissed it for want of prosecution. The law leaves a door cracked for mothers. I learned to sleep next to a cracked door. Life got good anyway. I opened the Bluebird Bakery 6 years ago with a small business loan and a used mixer named Gladys. I bought the house on Cherry Lane 5 years ago. The same house, because the kids had already survived enough moving. I packed something like 4,000 lunchboxes. I sat through stomach flus, a broken wrist, 2 science fairs, and 1 middle school heartbreak that required emergency pancakes. The kids called me T, and I never asked for more than that. And every year, always in June, 1 blank postcard showed up in my mailbox. No signature, no message. A beach in Florida, a casino in Nevada, a mountain somewhere cold. The first one scared me, and I called my lawyer. There was nothing to do about a blank rectangle. So I stopped showing anyone, and I kept them in a rubber band in the junk drawer, and I tried not to understand what they meant. Somebody out there knew our address. Somebody was keeping track of us. 1 postcard a year, saying nothing at all. 8 months ago, my mother had a stroke at her kitchen table, with a crossword half finished and the kettle still warm. She was 71. At the funeral, Ellie held my hand so tight my ring left a mark, and I kept thinking Mom died still believing her other daughter would walk in late. The way she was late to everything. She didn't come. The will was simple, and it shocked no one who knew Mom's last years. The farmhouse on the edge of town and $312,000, insurance, and a lifetime of not buying anything, went into a trust for her 3 grandchildren, for college, for their start in life. I was named trustee. Kendra's name appeared exactly once, in a sentence lawyers write when a person has been thought about and decided against. But here's the thing about probate that nobody warns you about. The law is thorough. An estate has to notify the heirs, even the disinherited ones, even the missing ones. So a statutory notice went out by certified mail to my sister's last known address, forwarded who knows how many times, like a flare fired over a dark ocean. For 3 months, nothing. I probated the estate, mowed the farmhouse lawn, kept the trust accounts clean enough to eat off. I let myself believe the flare had sunk. Then on a Tuesday in March, at 10 in the morning, a rental car parked in front of the Bluebird Bakery, and a woman stepped out in a white coat and sunglasses, and my hands knew her before my eyes did, because they went cold against the proofing pans. 12 years. Not a call, not a birthday card, not a word at our mother's grave. She pushed open my door like a customer and said, "Hello, T." She looked expensive and rented at the same time, like the car. The coat was white wool, the kind you wear when you've never carried a toddler with a nosebleed, and under the salon polish she was still my sister. Same chin, same way of tilting her head when she wanted something. The morning rush had cleared out. It was just me, the ovens, and 12 years walking toward my counter. She did it well, I'll give her that. Her eyes went shiny on cue. She said she'd been sick, that she'd been getting better for a long time, that she was finally in a place, she actually said in a place, where she could be what her children needed. She said she'd thought about them every single day. I looked at her nails while she said it. Fresh French tips. I thought about the junk drawer full of blank postcards, and I asked her one question. Where were you when Mom was buried? She blinked, and for half a second the performance stuttered, and I watched her choose not to answer. Instead, she leaned on my counter, lowered her voice, and got to it. I want my babies back, T. Babies. Mara is 17. Ellie was doing pre-algebra homework 2 blocks away, in a bedroom I painted twice. I felt the old heat come up my neck, and I set it down, because I'd had 12 years of practice setting things down. I told her the kids had school, routines, and a life, and that none of it was going to be renegotiated over my pastry case. If she wanted to talk, there were proper channels. She smiled then, and the shine in her eyes dried up like it had a switch. "You'll hear from someone," she said. And a week later, I did. The someone was a process server who apologized twice, and the papers came in 2 layers, like a bad cake. Layer 1, a petition to give Kendra custody of Jonah and Ellie, and to haul me into court over Mara's senior year. Her lawyer was a man named Martin Voss, and his petition used words the way tabloids use headlines. It said I had obtained custody through a forged consent, that her signature, the one I drove 900 miles for, was fake. It called the last 12 years a wrongful retention. In one paragraph, the one written for the local paper to quote, it used the word kidnapping. Layer 2 arrived at the courthouse the same week, a challenge to our mother's will, claiming I had poisoned a sick old woman's mind against her firstborn, and that second filing was the one that told me the truth. Because if the will fell, the trust fell with it. And if Mom died with no valid will, her estate would be split between her 2 daughters, and the kids would get nothing, and Kendra would get half a farmhouse and half of $312,000. The custody case was the violin. The will case was the wallet. 3 days later, a sheriff's deputy parked outside the Bluebird at lunch hour to ask me polite questions about custodial interference, and even though he closed the complaint within the week, my custody order took him 4 minutes to verify. Half the town watched that cruiser sit in front of my shop. Before I tell you what her lawyer did next, if you've ever raised a child who wasn't yours, or loved someone who mistook your kindness for weakness, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And subscribe, because the next part is the reason I'm telling this story at all. I told the kids on a Sunday night, over meatloaf, with the words I'd rehearsed against the shower tile. Your mother is back in town. She's asked a court to look at where you live. There will be a process, and grown-ups will handle it, and nothing about tomorrow changes. I kept my voice level, like reading a recipe. The kids did not. Jonah, 15, shoved back from the table so hard his chair caught the wall, and said she could— I won't repeat what she could do, and went out to shoot baskets in the dark until the neighbor's porch light came on. Ellie, 13, went the other direction, and hers was worse. She got very still, and her ears went pink, and she asked, "Does she want to meet us?" Hope. That's what was in her voice. Hope with the safety off. She was one when the van drove away. Her mother is a story other people tell. And Mara. 17, arms folded, watching me the whole time like a poker player. When the little ones were gone, she stacked the plates, and without looking up, she asked, "Why did she leave?" The real reason. I gave her the answer I'd been giving since she was 5, the smooth stone I'd sanded for a decade. She got lost, honey. Some people get lost. Mara set the last plate down carefully, like it might go off, and looked at me with our mother's eyes. "I'm not 5 anymore, T." She went upstairs. I stood in my kitchen with my hands in dishwater gone cold, understanding 2 things at once. My kids were about to be fought over in public, and the story I'd built to protect them had started to rot right under the floorboards. The first hearing lasted 40 minutes, and Martin Voss performed for 35 of them. He's a tall man who wears grief on behalf of his clients, and he stood in front of Judge Alan Hollis and called my life a kidnapping in slow motion, Your Honor. My lawyer, Carmen Ruiz, put the custody order on the record, along with the deputy's closed complaint, and that killed the criminal talk in one motion. You cannot steal what a court handed you. But civil court is a different animal, and Voss knew it. The forgery claim did exactly what it was designed to do. A signature can't defend itself. It just sits on the page while a stranger calls it a lie. The judge ordered a handwriting expert, appointed a guardian ad litem named Dana Winters to speak for the kids' interests, and, because the law tilts toward mothers who show up crying, even 12 years late, granted Kendra supervised visitation, 2 hours a week at the Family Services Center. 2 hours a week. It doesn't sound like much until you've had every hour for 12 years, and then it sounds like a hole drilled in the bottom of a boat. Afterward, in the parking lot, Carmen loosened her scarf and asked me the question good lawyers ask early. The consent page is strong, but they're going to swear it's fake. Do you have anything else from that day? Anything at all? I looked at a crack in the asphalt for a long time. I have something, I said. I'd rather not use it. Carmen studied me the way she studies exhibits. Whatever it is, she said, don't lose it. I didn't tell her it had spent 11 years in a fireproof box, waiting for exactly this. The Family Services Center has a playroom with a big window for exactly this occasion, and I stood on the wrong side of the glass and watched my sister meet her children. She was magnificent. I say that with a flat voice and a straight face. She arrived with gifts that proved somebody had done homework, the exact sneakers Jonah had posted about, a sketchbook with the brand of pens Ellie saves up for, a vintage band shirt for Mara, the band from the poster over her bed. Social media is a gift registry if you're shameless enough to use it. She cried at the right times and stopped at the right times. She knew when to reach and when to let them come to her. Ellie glowed like a struck match. She sat close, then closer, showing her mother a phone full of drawings, and Kendra leaned in, delighted by every swipe. Jonah lasted 20 minutes as a statue and then thawed by degrees, because 15-year-old boys are not built to be handed the right sneakers by a pretty woman who calls them tall. Only Mara stayed cool, polite, upright, answering questions like a witness. Here's the part I'd tell no one for weeks. Before Kendra walked into that playroom, I watched her in the hallway through the second window, where she didn't know she had an audience. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her coat twice, the way you press a tablecloth. Something in my chest moved an inch, and I hated it. Then the door opened, the shake vanished, the smile arrived, and the show began. Near the end, she bent to Mara's ear and whispered something. On the drive home, I asked, gently. Mara looked out the window. Nothing, she said. She said nothing. Said, Millbrook is a good town, and good towns run on simple stories, and there is no simpler story than a mother who wants her babies back. It got to church before I did. At the spring potluck, my Aunt Lori, my mother's sister, 68, a casserole in each hand and certainty to spare, cornered me by the dessert table with half the congregation in earshot. She didn't lower her voice. She never has. She's their mother, Thea. Blood is blood. What kind of woman keeps children from their own mother? Heads turned all down the folding tables. Somebody's fork stopped halfway. I could have said 12 years. I could have said blank postcards, or garbage bags on a porch, or a boy wheezing in an emergency room with no one to sign for him. But you can't win against a him, and blood is a him around here. So I picked up my pie server and gave my aunt the only true thing I had that fit in one breath. You're right, Lori. I'm not their mother. I'm just the one who stayed. It didn't land as a win. It wasn't meant to. It was meant to be true. That week, the bakery felt the tide turn. A wedding cake order canceled by voicemail with no reason given, a couple of one-star reviews from accounts that had never reviewed anything but me, 2 regulars who suddenly took their coffee across the street and their eyes somewhere else. I've never once fought the town. You can't. A town believes what's easiest to carry. Then Thursday night Carmen called, and her voice had lawyer gravel in it. Voss had subpoenaed the trust records. Every account, every receipt. He's not building a custody case, she said. He's doing inventory. That night, after the kids' doors clicked shut, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took down the gray box. It's a fireproof lockbox, dented on one corner, and it has lived on the top shelf of my closet since the year I became a legal guardian. Behind the winter blankets, above the reach of curious kids. Everything that proves my family is real lives inside it. 3 birth certificates, the custody order with its raised seal, 12 years of receipts, report cards with my signature on the parent line, a hospital bracelet the size of a bangle. And underneath all of it, flat on the bottom like a foundation stone, one manila envelope, sealed, with a strip of packing tape across the flap and a city inked in the corner in my own handwriting. Tulsa. I sat on the edge of my bed and held it under the lamp. 11 years, and the paper had gone soft at the edges, the tape gone amber. I knew every sentence inside it without looking, the way you know a scar under your sleeve. Just 1 hour, T. That's what she'd said on my porch. And I'd been living inside that hour ever since. And the exit had been in this envelope the whole time. Here's the arithmetic that kept it sealed. Opening it in a courtroom doesn't just show a judge who Kendra is, it shows the kids. Forever. There are no takebacks on a thing like that. You can't unread your mother's handwriting. I put the envelope back on the bottom, stacked 12 years of paper on top of it, turned the key, and slid the box home behind the blankets. Then I went to check the hallway, and stopped. Under Mara's door, at 1 in the morning, glowed the blue light of a phone. 2 Saturdays later, I found out who the phone was talking to. I was delivering a sheet cake across town when I saw them through the front glass of Woolery's diner. My niece in the corner booth, and across from her, in sunglasses she didn't need indoors, my sister. No caseworker within miles. Unsupervised contact, in violation of a court order barely a month old. On the table between them sat a small wrapped box with a ribbon, sliding across the formica under Kendra's manicure like a chess move. I didn't slam through the door. I want credit for that someday. I walked in, said good afternoon to both of them, and told Mara the cake in my van needed a second pair of hands. Kendra didn't argue. She sat back with a small smile and let me collect my own kid, and that smile followed me out the door like a hand on my back. In the van, Mara held the wrapped box on her lap and stared at the windshield, 17 and furious and scared, and then she pulled the pin. She told me things, T. She says you paid her. 12 years ago. She says you gave her money to stay away. That you wanted us for yourself. The road noise got very loud. Because that sentence is what a lie looks like when it's been built by a professional. One true bolt in the middle, everything around it bent. Yes, money had moved between me and my sister once in our lives, and she had taken my worst day, filed the serial numbers off it, and handed it to my girl as proof that her whole childhood was something I'd purchased out of loneliness. Mara watched the side of my face and asked quietly, "Is it true?" Is it true? A yes would poison her. A no would be a lie, and she'd smell it, because she has been reading my face since she was 5 years old. So I reached for the middle, the way I always had, and the middle finally failed me. "It's more complicated than that," I said. Mara nodded slowly, the way you nod at a stranger, and looked back at the windshield. "That's not a no." We drove the rest of the way with the radio off. She didn't open the wrapped box in front of me, and she didn't leave it in the van either. Something in our house shifted that afternoon. Nothing dramatic, just a door that used to stay open staying closed, a girl who used to talk to me chewing everything twice before saying half of it. Silence, it turns out, charges interest. Monday I sat in Carmen's office and told her about the diner. She straightened like a bird dog. An unsupervised meeting, arranged behind the court's back, with a gift. That's a violation. That's leverage. We report it today, and it stains Kendra in front of Judge Hollis. Then she saw my face. Reporting it meant affidavits. It meant Mara summoned into a hallway with lawyers, made to testify about her own mother, turned from a 17-year-old into Exhibit C. That is Kendra's way of using children, and it has never once been mine, and I wasn't going to learn it now just because it worked. I told Carmen no. She rubbed the bridge of her nose and said I was making her job harder and her respect for me inconvenient. "Fine," she said. "Then we need something else. And you keep telling me you have something else." So the question became when. I go to the cemetery on the first Sunday of every month, Mom's stone, and then Ray's, because somebody should, and the kids come at Christmas and birthdays. It was raining thin and cold, and I was walking the gravel loop with carnations when I saw a figure already at Ray's grave, and I stopped under the maple before she could hear me. Kendra. No audience, no lawyer, no camera-ready coat. a gas station umbrella and flat shoes, kneeling on the wet grass in front of her husband's name. She was crying in a way I hadn't seen since we were girls, the ugly kind, the kind that doesn't photograph. And she was talking to the stone. I only caught pieces over the rain. That she was sorry. That she couldn't breathe in that house after the accident, with 3 babies and his boots still by the door. And then one whole sentence, clear as a bell, that I have turned over every night since. After the first year, there was no version of me coming back that wasn't a monster, so I stayed gone. I stood under that maple with carnations going heavy in my hand, and for one long minute I saw the whole thing from inside her skin. 31, widowed, drowning, raised her entire life to be the pretty one somebody rescues, and nobody left to do the rescuing. I almost stepped out. I almost said her name, the old way, without armor in it. Then she stood, brushed the knees of her pants, looked down at Ray's stone, and her voice changed back into the one from my bakery. "That house should have been half mine," she told her dead husband. "Mom owed me that." She fixed her collar and walked to the rental car through the rain. I stayed under the maple until she was gone, and I put the carnations down, and I stopped feeling like a monster for what I was about to do. And Voss ran mine like a man carving a roast. Small slices, no hurry. When did I take possession of the children? Possession, like they were furniture. Had I ever restricted their contact with their mother? Had I benefited financially from my mother's estate? Had I influenced her will? 2 hours of small slices, and then, without changing his tone, the knife went in. "Ms. Atwood, did you ever pay my client money?" The room went still. Carmen's pen stopped. And this is what people don't understand about oaths. The truth doesn't check first whether it will be used fairly. "Yes," I said. Voss let it sit there, then smiled, unhurried, like a man confirming a reservation. $15,000, wasn't it? Wired out of state? No further questions today? And I watched the story assemble itself in that little room, the story he would tell a courtroom soon, the story Kendra had already whispered to my niece as an inoculation. A lonely woman, aging out of her chances, wanted a family. She found her widowed sister at rock bottom, waved $15,000 at her grief, bought her signature, and helped her disappear. Then played the martyr for 12 years on the strength of it. It was elegant. It was obscene. Every fact in it was mine, and every joint had been rewired to bear the opposite load. In the parking lot, Carmen was quiet for a while, and then she asked the question she'd been circling for a month. "This thing you have and don't want to use, does it answer that?" I looked at her over the roof of my car. "It answers everything," I said. "That's why the kids can never see it." Carmen held my eyes. "Thea, after today, the question is no longer whether they hear it. It's whose mouth they hear it from." Carmen laid it out for me the next morning with legal pad honesty. Option 1, produce the envelope. It rebuts the forgery claim, it reframes the money, and it likely ends both cases. And it enters the public record, discoverable, quotable, permanent, where 3 kids with library cards and Wi-Fi will someday read every line of it. Option 2, keep it sealed and fight on character. 12 years of receipts against a mother's tears, in front of a judge trained by law and habit to give mothers the benefit of the doubt. She didn't tell me which one to choose. Good lawyers don't. They just make sure you can't pretend you didn't know the prices. That same week, Dana Winters came to do her guardian ad litem interviews, a calm woman with sensible shoes and a canvas tote, court appointed to speak for the kids. She toured the house. She saw the growth chart penciled inside the pantry door, the shelf of science fair ribbons. She talked to each kid alone in the living room with the door cracked, per protocol, while I stood in the kitchen not listening so hard my ears rang. Jonah came out in 8 minutes. Mara took 20 and left with her jaw set. Ellie took half an hour, and came out with her sketchbook hugged to her chest and found me by the sink. She stood there a second, balancing on the edge of something. Then she asked it. T. Did our mom ever try to come back? Even once? 12 years of protecting her, and the kindest sentence I had ever built for her. She got lost, honey, stood in my throat, and refused to come out, because Mara was leaning in the doorway watching me, and one more smooth stone would cost me both girls. The mail saved me. I am not proud of that. Certified letter, Voss's office. The letter was titled Confidential Settlement Proposal, and it was the most honest document Kendra ever sent. And Mara came down in her old robe, and instead of the refrigerator she pulled out the chair across from me, which she hadn't done in weeks. She looked at the checkbook, and at the letter beside it, which I hadn't hidden fast enough. And my girl read the whole battlefield in about 4 seconds, because she's mine, even where it's inconvenient. That's what she really came for, she said. Not a question. I didn't insult her by pretending. Then Mara leaned forward with her elbows on the table, and she took my whole operation apart in one breath. If you pay her again, she'll come back again. You know that, right? Again. The word sat between us with its shoes off, completely at home, and I understood that she'd known, since the diner, maybe before, and had been waiting to see what I'd do with the truth this time. And then Mara said the other thing, the one that ended 11 years of policy at my kitchen table. She said, "Stop protecting me from my own life, T." 17 years old. She got up, squeezed my shoulder like I do to her when she's sick, and went back to bed. I sat with the lamp and the checkbook a while longer, to be sure. Then I closed the checkbook, and at 3 in the morning I stood in my closet doorway, looking up at the gray box behind the blankets. At 9 the next morning, I put the gray box on Carmen's desk, still cold from my trunk. I told her no settlement. I heard my own voice say it the way I say oven temperatures. Flat, exact, not up for discussion. I bought her silence once. It expired. I'm done renting my family back 1 decade at a time. Then I turned the key, took out the manila envelope with Tulsa inked on the corner, and set it in front of my lawyer and told her what was inside, out loud, in order, for the first time in 11 years. Carmen didn't touch it for a moment. Lawyers develop a reverence for paper the way bakers do for starters. She could smell what it would do. Then she walked me through the consequences at funeral pace, because she owed me that. Once it goes on the exhibit list, Voss sees it. Once it's evidence, it's public record. Sealing requests fail more than they succeed. Reporters can pull it, neighbors can pull it, and one day, 5 years, 10, the kids can pull it. Or some helpful stranger will pull it for them. Once it's in, Thea, they will read it someday. All of them. I'd done my grieving for that at the kitchen table already. Then they'll hear it from me first, I said. Every word. Before that courtroom does. We declined the settlement in writing before lunch. Voss's reply came by email at 4:11, and it was short even for him. We'll see you at trial. Bring the forgery. I read it twice, standing in my empty bakery with the chairs up on the tables, and I felt the door swing shut behind me. The good, clean sound of a decision you can't take back. For 11 years I'd guarded a secret. Starting now, I was just early. Dana Winters filed her guardian ad litem report the week before trial, and Carmen read me the important parts over the phone. The children are deeply bonded to their aunt, whose home is the only one 2 of them have ever known. Removal would be devastating. Recommend the current custody arrangement continue. I was breathing again by the 3rd sentence, and then Carmen paused and read me the other line, the one aimed at me. The guardian's persistent lack of transparency with the children regarding their mother's departure is noted with concern. Noted with concern. A stranger with a canvas tote had walked through my house for one afternoon and put her finger, gently, precisely, on the exact beam I'd built the whole structure on. I didn't argue with it. You don't argue with a level. It just tells you what's true. 2 nights before trial, at dinner, Mara announced she was coming to court. I said absolutely not, and she pointed out, correctly, that she was 17, that it was a public courtroom, that she had a study day, and that Mrs. Callahan next door could stay with Jonah and Ellie, but nobody could stay with her. I looked at this girl, taller than me since 15, raised on my cooking and my rules and my silences, and I understood that the last thing I had left to protect her from was watching me stop protecting her. So I said okay. I ironed her good blouse anyway. She let me. The night before trial, I didn't sleep, and I didn't try. I sat on the edge of my bed with the envelope in my lap, and through the wall I could hear Ellie's white noise machine, the ocean sound on since she was 4. In 9 hours, whatever a judge decided, her mother was going to die a second time, and I was the one bringing the shovel. The county courtroom smells like old oak and radiator dust, and the ceiling fan has clicked on every third rotation since probably Eisenhower. Judge Hollis presided. The gallery held a scatter of townspeople who had decided their errands could wait, and in the second row, in her good blouse, sat Mara, hands folded, spine straight, watching everything. Kendra took the stand in dove gray, and for 40 minutes she gave the finest performance of her life. She had been ill. She touched her collarbone when she said it, letting the word do its own insinuating. She had gotten help, gotten steady, tried for years to find her way back to her children. And then, with her chin trembling at exactly the right frequency, she found me at the respondents' table and told Judge Hollis the story I'd heard assembling itself for months. Her little sister had always wanted what she had. Her little sister had come to her at her lowest, waving money, hungry for a family of her own. She paid me to disappear, Your Honor, and when I refused to stay away, she threatened me. That signature they keep showing everyone. It is not mine. She wept then, carefully, the tissue hovering. I watched the gallery lean toward her like plants toward a window, and I understood, with a kind of scientific calm, that she might actually win this. Blood in the front row, tears on the stand, and one signature she had decided to simply unsign, betting that a traveling notary from 11 years back might as well be a ghost. Voss turned to Judge Hollis with the satisfaction of a man resting his case an inch from the finish line, and then he looked at my lawyer, and the words came out of him like a door opening onto a long drop. Your witness. Carmen walked me through the honest inventory first, the custody order, the school records, the medical files, 12 years of my signature on the parent line of a child's life. Then Voss got his turn, and he came at me pleasantly, the way you'd approach a pie you intend to drop. Wasn't it true I'd struggled to have a family of my own? That I'd located his vulnerable, grieving client through a private investigator? That money had quietly changed hands? He built each question one brick higher, and then he set the last one down with the flourish he'd been saving all trial. Isn't it true, Ms. Atwood, that you bought yourself 3 children for $15,000? The fan clicked. Somewhere behind me, a purse zipper went still. I looked at Mara in the second row. My girl, in her ironed blouse, who had told me at a midnight kitchen table to stop protecting her from her own life. Then I looked at Judge Hollis, and I heard my own voice come out level. The voice I use when the ovens are on fire and panicking is a luxury. No, sir. And I'd like to enter something into evidence. Voss objected on principle. Carmen was already at the bench with the exhibit list, where it had sat for weeks. Respondents Exhibit 14, disclosed, described, fought over in 2 motions Voss had lost. Testimony. Judge Hollis waved them through the lawyer weather and let me speak. It's an envelope, Your Honor. It's 11 years old. I sealed it in a motel outside Tulsa the day my sister signed that consent, and I have kept it sealed ever since, because of what it would cost 3 children to read it. The bailiff carried it up, and the courtroom watched it travel like it was lit. I found Kendra's face while it moved. She had gone the color of unbaked dough. For 11 years she had banked on my silence. She was watching the account close. She asked me for 1 hour, I said, to the judge, but not only to him. I gave her children 12 years. The rest of that story is in your hands now. Judge Hollis is a heavyset man with reading glasses on a chain, and he opened my envelope with a letter knife, unhurried, the way judges do everything. 3 things came out onto the bench. The first was the notarized consent. The original, seal raised, signed in blue ink while a notary and I both watched. The twin of the copy Voss had spent months calling a forgery. The second was a wire receipt, dated the same week, $15,000, drawn out of a savings account labeled, "In my own optimistic handwriting from another lifetime, culinary school." The third was a single sheet of motel stationery, and I watched him read it, and I knew every loop of the handwriting he was reading, because I had read it 10,000 times before I taped the flap. "You want papers? 15,000, and I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. Don't come looking for me again. Tell them I'm dead if it's easier. K." The courtroom was silent, but courtrooms are often silent. This was different. This was the silence of a man behind a bench reading a mother's price list. Judge Hollis read it twice. I watched his eyes go back to the top and walk down again, slower, as if the words might behave better on a second pass. Then he took off his reading glasses, folded them, and looked at Kendra for a long moment, and she looked at the exit sign. And then he looked at me, and Judge Alan Hollis, 22 years on the bench in that county, asked his question into the quietest room in Ohio. "Ms. Atwood, do they know?" The fan clicked. In the second row, my daughter, I'm going to call her that now, I'd earned it by then, leaned forward. "Not yet," I said. He held my eyes and something passed between us, 2 people who each knew the weight of paper. Then he adjourned for lunch, ordered the exhibit into the record, and said quietly that the afternoon could wait until the family had had its hour. There's a conference room off the courthouse hallway with a wobbly table and a window painted shut, and that's where my family actually happened, more than in any courtroom. Mrs. Callahan drove Jonah and Ellie over from school when I called. Mara was already there, arms crossed, pacing. I sat the 3 of them down, and I put copies of all of it on the wobbly table, face down, my hand flat on top. And then I paid the bill I'd been running from for 11 years. I told them about the clipboard and the emergency room, about a boy who wheezed and an aunt who legally did not exist. I told them about the private investigator, and the motel outside Tulsa, and the papers on the little table, and the blank one a year, every June, our address in her pocket the whole time. I told them their mother asked for money to sign, and that I paid it. $15,000. My school. My someday. And I told them why I never said so, because I was afraid they'd do the math a lie can do in a child's head, and conclude they'd been bought, that they were a purchase, that love with a receipt behind it isn't love. Then I turned the papers over and let them read the stationery, because they were going to hear it in a courtroom transcript someday no matter what I did. Tell them I'm dead if it's easier. Ellie made a sound I will hear for the rest of my life, and folded into Jonah, who held her and stared at the wall with his jaw working. And Mara read it standing up, twice, then set it down and looked at me. "You let me spend 12 years wondering what I did wrong." Quiet. Not a shout. The shout would have hurt less. You let me wonder. I didn't defend myself because she was right, and because I finally understood the flaw in the load-bearing beam. I hadn't only been protecting them. I'd been protecting me. The version of me that never had to watch their faces do what their faces were doing now. I treated the truth like it was mine to carry. I told the 3 of them. It was yours. I'm sorry it took a courtroom to make me brave. Then I slid the copies across the wobbly table to Mara, all of them, and put the choosing where it should have lived all along. You decide when the little ones read the rest. You. Not me, not a judge, not her. Ellie wiped her face on her sleeve and asked the only question left in the world. "Did you ever want to give us back?" And I said, "Not for 1 hour." The afternoon session took 40 minutes, and Kendra's case died quietly, at a table, the way paper kills things. With the original consent in evidence, a notary's seal on the exhibit, and the court's handwriting examiner on standby, the forgery claim was no longer merely weak. It was perjury, with a runway. Voss saw it. Lawyers can smell their own malpractice premiums. After a whispered conference, his client withdrew the forgery allegation on the record and conceded the signature was hers, which meant conceding the note, which meant conceding the price. Judge Hollis denied the petition from the bench. He made a finding of abandonment. 12 years, he said, without one phone call, $1, or one birthday card, is not an illness or an estrangement. It is a decision, renewed daily. He said the word decision like a gavel. The will contest went with it. You cannot claim your mother was poisoned against you while your own handwriting sits in the record explaining exactly how she came to be. And he looked at my sister for a long moment and told her that the court had rarely seen a parent better served by a child's guardian than she had been, at her own asking price. No prison. No cuffs. Life doesn't give you that scene, and I'd stopped needing it. In the hallway afterward, Kendra came past us with Voss a careful 3 steps behind. She slowed when she reached Mara. My girl stood very straight, holding her grandmother's posture and my ironing, and she looked at her mother the way you look at weather moving off. Kendra's mouth opened, and whatever was in it, she swallowed. She turned to me instead, and for 2 seconds the performance was gone and it was just my sister, tired, 43, holding a purse in both hands. You were always better at keeping things than me, she said, even them. Then she walked out through the double doors into the June light, and the 3 kids watched her go, and not one of them moved a foot in her direction. The clicking fan was louder than their goodbye. 6 weeks later, with the abandonment finding on the books and Dana Winter's blessing in the file, Carmen filed to terminate Kendra's rights and start adoption proceedings for Jonah and Ellie. Nobody objected. Nobody appeared. The certified notices came back signed by a stranger at a mail center in Nevada. Mara turned 18 that October, which meant she'd aged out of the whole question, until she sat down at my kitchen table on a Sunday night, slid a printout across to me, and said, "File one for me too." Adult adoption. It exists. She'd researched it herself, the way she researches everything, with 16 tabs open. "And change my last name while you're at it," she said. And then, because she saw my face, she looked at her hands and finished it. "You're not just the one who stayed, T. You're my mom. The paperwork's just late." The paperwork was 12 years late, and I signed it anyway, and I did not manage to do it with a steady hand, and no one at that table held it against me. The gray box lives on the counter now. Unlocked. Empty. Mostly. The originals belong to a court file in the county seat, and the copies belong to Mara, who keeps them where her sister can't stumble on them yet, and asks Ellie's therapist, not me, when the time might come. That was her call to make. We don't keep each other's truths in this house anymore. We just keep each other. In June, a letter came addressed to all 3 kids in looping handwriting, postmarked Nevada. I didn't open it. I didn't screen it. I set it on the kitchen table with the bills, told them what it was, and left the room. And through the door, I heard the 3 of them decide together. Voices low. 3 kids wiser about their mother than I ever let them be. They put it in the junk drawer with the blank postcards and the still-wrapped ribbon box from the diner. Unopened. Maybe someday. Their call. She asked me for 1 hour 12 years ago, on a porch I still sweep every morning. Her hour is finally up. And the kids? Now they know. All of it. And they're still here. If you take one thing from my 12 years, let it be this. Blood can tell you where you came from, but it's the people who stay, who show up at 4 a.m. with a nebulizer, who tell you the truth even when it costs them the version of themselves they love best, who tell you where you belong. Family isn't the name on your birth certificate. It's the name on 4,000 lunchboxes. It's who's still standing in the kitchen when every set of headlights has kept on going. That's my story. One gray box, one sealed envelope, one question from a judge. Do they know? And the longest hour my family ever lived. If you've ever been the one who stayed, the one who carried it all quietly, tell me your story in the comments, because somebody down there needs to read it tonight. Subscribe to Calm Drama Stories before you go. There are more quiet women out here, and we're done being quiet.